Her name is on every box. Her legend shapes every story. And yet, after nearly 4 decades, we've never had the chance to play as Princess Zelda in a 3D mainline game. Tears of the Kingdom was the perfect opportunity for this. We had a Zelda who was complex, courageous, and more fully developed than ever before. The fans were ready, the narrative set the stage, but Nintendo dropped the ball. And yes, Echoes of Wisdom finally gave us a canonical playable Zelda, and that matters. But let's be honest, it wasn't a flagship title. It wasn't her leading a game on the scale she deserves. But if Tears of the Kingdom wasn't her moment, will it ever happen? Playable Princess Zelda is a topic that I talk about a lot, but somehow have never made a dedicated video on. It's a bit of a divisive issue in the community. It touches on representation, game design, the role of the protagonist, and the evolution of the franchise. So today, I want to dig into the history of playable Zelda, discuss the missed opportunities we could have or should have had, and explore what it all might mean for the future of The Legend of Zelda. I'll also be sharing some thoughts from you all about her strengths as a protagonist. And just to be clear, when I say playable Zelda, I'm talking about Princess Zelda functioning as the main character in a 3D flagship game. So, with all that in mind, it's time to explore Zelda's journey from damsel to hero. Let's go back to where it all started. We first met the princess in the original Legend of Zelda game, where the prologue establishes the role that she would go on to hold in most games, working behind the scenes to stop Ganon before being captured and needing to be saved by Link. Just a few years later, we technically had our first playable Zelda in the non-canon and highly infamous CDI games, Zelda's Adventure and The Wand of Gamelon. Yes, they were weird. Yes, they were a bit of a mess. But hey, Zelda was the lead. I'm not saying they were good, but let's not blame her for that. Over the next 30 years, we got a string of Zeldas in the mainline games who were fascinating characters. Some who were powerful and wise, some who were hidden in disguise, but none of whom were playable. Our first canon Zelda who was somewhat playable was in 2009's Spirit Tracks, where Zelda acted as Link's ghostly companion. She had the ability to possess phantoms, and you could move her around to help you solve puzzles. A cool idea, and our first opportunity for the player to interact with the game through her in that way. Shortly after, we had what I would consider one of the greatest tragedies in this history in Skyward Sword, where reportedly, we almost got a post-game expansion that followed Zelda's journey when she separated from Link, which would have been amazing. Sadly, it was ultimately scrapped, and all that remains of that idea are the scenes that play during the credits. Meanwhile, throughout this time, Zelda began making appearances as a playable character in crossover titles, like Cadence of Hyrule and Super Smash Bros. From Melee to Ultimate. And yes, as you may have guessed, I am in fact a Zelda main. Don't come for me, I definitely spam up B, but sometimes chaos is the strategy. And then during this time, we got our first Zelda entry from another outside developer, Koei Tecmo, who developed the Hyrule Warriors series. The first Hyrule Warriors was pretty unhinged, bringing together characters from many different games, including several iterations of Zelda, like the Hyrule Warriors Zelda, Tetra, and Sheik. And then we get to 2017, with the release of Breath of the Wild, which featured, I would argue, the most developed Zelda of the series. She's not playable, but she is central to the narrative, arguably more so than Link. Her arc of struggle, failure, and growth gave the game much of its emotional resonance. And this in turn led to Koei Tecmo producing a new iteration of Hyrule Warriors called Age of Calamity, which served as a sort of prequel, alternate universe exploration of the events leading into Breath of the Wild. Now, to my knowledge, Nintendo doesn't consider this canon. But, as I learned the hard way via my comment section on the last video, a lot of people do. And while it still doesn't fit my criteria for what I want from a playable Zelda game, it was incredibly fun to play and rewarding for someone who loved that character and wanted to see her use her technology and magic skills in battle. And then, finally, we got the real thing. 2024's Echoes of Wisdom gave us our first canonical, fully playable Princess Zelda in a standalone game. This game introduced a unique, magic-based combat and puzzle system that was unlike anything the series had done before. It was creative, it was fresh, and it showed us what a Zelda-led game could look like. I absolutely adore this game. It encompasses so many of the things I love about this franchise. The dungeons and puzzles were so fun, and the side quests were cute and quirky and explored Zelda's relationships with the people of Hyrule. I loved it. However, the smaller scale of the game left some wanting more, and it left me thinking about what we could have had with a larger game. With all that context out of the way, let's talk about Tears of the Kingdom, and why I genuinely believe it was the ideal moment for Zelda to be the main character. Leading up to Tears of the Kingdom, speculation was wild. The trailers were teasing a bigger role for Zelda, and a lot of folks online, myself included, believed she might finally take the lead. She even had a new short haircut, which many thought would make her easier to animate in combat. And narratively, it made perfect sense. In Breath of the Wild, she had incredible character development, and Tears of the Kingdom had the space to build on that. She was finally free from her 100-year imprisonment, was learning from her past mistakes, and actively trying to rebuild and understand her kingdom. Giving her the spotlight in the sequel would have built on that arc, and maybe more importantly, would have addressed a number of common complaints that emerged about Tears of the Kingdom. Like, let's play out the simplest fix. During the prologue, instead of sending Zelda to the past, it's Link who travels back in time, while Zelda remains in the present as the protagonist. What could that have solved? The first thing is the continuity confusion. Many people felt like Link's heroism in Breath of the Wild wasn't acknowledged and created continuity errors between the games. Easy solution, just don't use Link. That way, if you're interacting with an NPC you met in the last game, it's okay that they don't remember you. The next issue was map fatigue, because even with the additions of the sky and the depths, some players felt that Hyrule was too similar and repetitive to the last game. Playing from Zelda's perspective, however, as a princess and a scholar instead of a knight, would change how players interact with both characters and the environment. For instance, side quests would take on a whole new angle of a ruler serving her people. We'd get to know the Zelda we've only heard about from the NPCs and more recently from voice memories, the princess who wanted to rebuild her kingdom and help her citizens. And, of course, the lore possibilities could have expanded greatly. As a bit of an archaeologist, Zelda would have likely had more interest in investigating Zonai ruins and diving into the mysteries of the past. Perhaps if the game was from her point of view, we would have gotten more answers about the history of ancient Hyrule. And finally, from a story symmetry angle, Link saves Zelda in Breath of the Wild. So, if in Tears of the Kingdom she gets to return the favor, the story structure would feel less repetitive and more like a full circle moment. And, as a bonus, it could even give us the chance to know Link better through the memories, like we did with Zelda. He's an interesting character too, and would probably benefit from being given a little more dimension. Now, that is the easiest fix. It would essentially mean swapping out the models, as most of the gameplay really wouldn't have to change. And this idea isn't just a dream. It exists! There's an incredible fan project, which is where much of the footage in this video comes from, called The Shattered Prophecy. I've played it, and for me, while it highlighted some of the unrealized potential of Tears of the Kingdom, it also made me fall back in love with this version of Hyrule. Because while some of the changes are subtle, in many ways it feels like a whole different experience. I'll be putting info in the description if you'd like to check it out for yourself. Their team put in a lot of hard work creating it, and to me, it serves as a beautiful proof of concept. If a team of modders can do all this, Nintendo certainly could have too. In fact, given Nintendo's capacity, we can imagine some other, more complicated ways they could have incorporated Zelda as a playable character in the game. For instance, if they'd been willing to go further, they could have opened up the memory mechanic and made Zelda's memories in the ancient past playable. Imagine alternating chapters of Link in the past and Zelda in the present, or vice versa. While I love the cinematic nature of the memories, actually having the opportunity to play through them and experience them live would have just added so much meaning. And the most complicated fix of all, which obviously I think would have been the most interesting, would have been to time travel with Zelda and fully set the game in the ancient past of the Zonai. Yes, actually going into the ancient past would have required an overhaul of the map of Hyrule, but honestly, it would have been so incredibly satisfying and would have silenced any of the $70 DLC discourse. And look, I know this idea is probably unrealistic, especially given how long Tears of the Kingdom's development took, but you know what? Age of Imprisonment might actually give us a taste of this very idea, and I can't wait to see it. So what does all this mean for the future? From the Skyward Sword post-game to the lost potential of Tears of the Kingdom, there were certainly a lot of missed opportunities for playable Zelda in the past. But Echoes of Wisdom feels like a long overdue acknowledgement of what fans have wanted, even if it's not a traditional mainline game. And now we have the upcoming Age of Imprisonment, announced alongside the Switch 2, which suggests that Nintendo's putting serious weight behind it. Between these two titles, there's momentum, and I hope Nintendo sees what we see. Zelda can carry a game, people are excited to play as her, and there's narrative and gameplay potential worth exploring. And again, Tears of the Kingdom really was the perfect moment to take this leap. Zelda as a character was at her most developed and beloved. She'd already proven herself as a compelling fighter in Hyrule Warriors, and the sequel leaned so heavily on Breath of the Wild's foundation, so having Zelda as the lead could have been the shakeup it needed. Instead, I think Nintendo played it safe. And now, I'm worried that making that shift in a future game might be even harder. With Breath of the Wild still being the best-selling Zelda game ever, there'll be pressure to play to the series' classic strengths. Some execs might see changing the main character as too risky. But here's the thing, Zelda as a playable lead isn't just about representation, though that matters, it's about evolving the franchise. She offers a different set of abilities, a different worldview, and a different relationship with the world of Hyrule. As we saw in Echoes of Wisdom, that opens up a ton of new gameplay ideas. And it might even help solve a different problem. How will Nintendo move on and differentiate the next big game from the Wilds era? Zelda could be the key to that shift. A new protagonist means new mechanics, new direction, and new possibilities. And Nintendo's already seen success with female leads, so I think it's Zelda's turn. Now, I'll admit that I am biased. I've always wanted a playable Zelda. She's the only character I play in Smash and Hyrule Warriors, and I'll pretty much mod any game I can to make her playable. Simply put, she's my favorite character in all of gaming. And for those who say, you just want to play as a girl, first of all, no, even though I think that's a perfectly valid reason. But beyond that, Zelda has consistently been a rich, intriguing character with unique powers, deep lore connections, and so much untapped potential. I mean, she's been a princess, a scholar, a mage, a ghost, a pirate, a ninja, a dragon, and a literal goddess, and yet, never the lead. So yes, this is something I care about. And no, it doesn't represent everyone, but from the conversations I've had, there are dozens of us. And as a matter of fact, you don't just have to take my word for it. I know I'm not alone in this, so I asked my community, if you want Zelda as a playable character, why? What are your reasons for it? And the responses were amazing. I got way more than I was expecting, and there were so many thoughtful and creative ideas. I wanted to share some of them here, but in the interest of keeping this video a manageable length, I couldn't highlight them all and had to trim some down. But if you want to see the full discussion, be sure to check out the post which I'll link in the description. It's worth it. Anyway, to make things easy, I've grouped some of the community ideas into 3 main categories: lore and story potential, gameplay, and character development. So let's dive into what you all had to say. Starting with lore and story potential, I'll kick it off with some thoughts from my Zelda tuber pal, GossipGeist. He said, Echoes of Wisdom proved that Zelda as the main character can have a huge impact on the differences in storytelling from both a narrative and lore standpoint. Being connected to Hylia through sacred blood allows Zelda to be granted a more direct connection to the gods than Link. An audience with the 3 golden goddesses themselves is something that's never been granted to Link. But the first time Zelda's ever playable, that immediately happens. Zelda being the MC can give us a whole new, never-before-seen look at the deeper side of the Zelda universe's lore. Plus, more games with Zelda as the main character would mean there's more of a chance to finally learn where the hell her iconic Bow of Light comes from. It's about as mysterious as the Master Sword's scabbard. They both just kinda show up. But from where? Chet said, I'm very interested in seeing Zelda in a playable role similar to, or directly showing, what happened in Ocarina of Time while Link was in the Sacred Realm for 7 years. In the game, we're told or it's implied that she was contacting the sages, hiding her identity, and thwarting Ganondorf's rise to power. It would be awesome to see her in a playable role, maybe even in an Ocarina of Time remake, where she's working behind the scenes in Link's absence, keeping the spark of hope alive. Imagine playing sections of the game as Zelda, staying one step ahead of Ganondorf, forming a rebellion, and slowly building her magic to fight back. On a similar note, Bitjester Media said playing a Zelda undergoing Sheikah training would be pretty cool, like the princess from Ocarina becoming Sheik, or the one from Skyward Sword traveling with Impa. Tim said, with Zelda games, there's usually only one way to complete a quest, or the outcome's irrelevant, and you can try again until you succeed. I want choices, hard choices that have consequences. Zelda is supposed to use her wisdom, so let me be her and let the chips fall where they fall. Jay Chandler said, a playable Zelda could give us the chance for a big gameplay switch-up. Maybe a heavily story-driven game with a small scope. Like Zelda learning to use her powers for the first time, or Zelda leading an expedition to foreign lands. Make her prove why the royal family deserves to rule. Or explore what an OP Zelda struggles with if she holds the power of a goddess. Now, moving on to gameplay, I'll start with some thoughts from Zelda gameplay expert Cap Bergerson. He said, I would argue that what is most exciting about playable Zelda is the different gameplay opportunities it would bring. Nintendo clearly feels that if they have a character other than Link as their protagonist, then they need to justify that change with new and interesting mechanics that set that character apart from Link. With Echoes, we still got sword fighter form, however, so it kind of felt like we had one foot in the door and one foot out. I want them to take the plunge, go all in on it, explore new gameplay possibilities that feel more attuned to Zelda than Link. He's had 20 games, and they're wonderful. I will continue to revisit them as the years go by. But with this many games in the series, it feels nice to have something a little different once in a while. Echoes was a great taste of that, but I want more. We2D2 said, I think a playable Zelda would be a good idea, because it may offer a great opportunity for a Twilight Princess-like combat system. Being a royal, Zelda would likely not have been exposed much to combat techniques. So we could have a system in which Link or another Master Warrior teaches her hidden skills, like the Hero Shade in Twilight Princess. Jacob mentioned how Zelda could have a variety of playstyles, using spells, having tech knowledge, and Sheikah-style stealth as part of her combat repertoire. Eternal Scarecrow described many different gameplay models, like Zelda-Link collaborative puzzles, or even bigger swings, like leaning into Civilization-style strategy games where Zelda has to run the kingdom. Jay Chandler said, playable Zelda plus playable Link could give us another chance at the dual world trope that the series loves so much. Imagine if it could be co-op. Joe said, I want playable Zelda because I want to play as a mage. I want to fight using magic instead of melee weapons. Also, if we can play as both Link and Zelda, then one can provide open world gameplay while the other provides the linear story. That was the missed opportunity in Tears of the Kingdom. Jones the Moblin said Wild's Era Zelda specifically had the most potential as a playable Zelda. That particular Zelda is extremely crafty when it comes to tech, so her understanding of tech combined with her sage powers could lead to some real interesting mechanics. And she wouldn't even need to lose an arm for it. Actual Banavator said, I think we need a game where Zelda is a hero using weapons. She already uses some like the Bow of Light and her sword in Twilight Princess, so maybe a game showing that. As for character development, Javier said, for me, it would be the perfect opportunity to flesh Zelda out as more of a character with her own agency and personality, rather than a plot device that's important to the story because of what the story demands her role to be. Echoes of Wisdom is great in how it shows us that, albeit without delving deeply into her personality due to her being presented as a silent protagonist like Link. A fully voiced protagonist Zelda in a mainline 3D title would grant us the chance of seeing her as her own character with her own personal journey of growth and struggle, thereby introducing a more in-depth incarnation than ever before in the series. Baltazar said, I'm always down to play as a princess. I like being both the protagonist and the support. Besides, how wonderful it is to travel the world and be heroic looking, all gorgeous and refined. World Singer said, as a kid, I just always thought Zelda was so cool. I was obsessed with Princess's baseline, but she was magical and mysterious and pretty. I wanted to be her. She's always been a compelling character, and Sheik's gender stuff resonated with me as a little queer boy. I'm not saying it has to be every game, but dear lord, it's been like 3 to 4 decades of Link games. Let's find ways to keep the franchise fresh. Zelda and Ganondorf could use a lot more development and screen time. The Hyrule Archives wrote that in most Zelda games, Link is used more as a blank slate for the character, so to compensate, Zelda is usually a character with a lot of personality. So if Nintendo decides to go with a Zelda protagonist again, it would be a great opportunity to give more character to Link. Miskin Wolf said, I think it would be an interesting change of perspective, and it would be fun. I loved Echoes of Wisdom, but I would love to see a Zelda wielding the Master Sword. Maybe the Link in this time is older and experienced, so is mentoring Zelda. It could make for an interesting dynamic change. Maxim Newman said, because it's cool to play as strong female protagonists, instead of them needing saving, as has been the case for Zelda in most of the Zelda games. Danny Kaye said, this might sound really silly, but I grew up with Disney and always loved the princesses and would have loved to play as them, but I grew up and moved on. Whenever I heard about a playable Zelda, I was generally kind of like, but we have Link, why would we need that? Until I got Age of Calamity and soon after watched Brave, with Merida being a princess in the Middle Ages, riding horseback and shooting her bow and arrows. I could just imagine doing that with Zelda and my childhood dream came back. And lastly, Carla said, because it's her series by name and she deserves to be the playable hero of her own franchise. A trailer from Nintendo back in the 1990s for Ocarina of Time asked, will thou get the girl or will thou play like one? Things have come so far since then, but they can go further. I want to play as this girl, as Zelda, who I've loved for years and years now. It's time. So huge thank you to everyone who climbed up on the Playable Zelda soapbox with me. It's getting a little crowded up here, but the view is great. The fact that so many of us had such strong, detailed ideas for a playable Zelda game says a lot. Not just about our love for this character, but about how much potential is still sitting untapped. Whether you want her playable for the story, the gameplay, or just because she deserves it, there's room for all of it. It's been nearly 40 years of The Legend of Zelda. Maybe it's finally time we let her be the legend. So, what do you think? Are you a playable Zelda believer? What would you like to see in her first flagship starring game? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. To me, it felt like it was long overdue. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.